the Thursday, 26th of November, the Derby Homes Board meeting. If I can just ask people, well, two things. First of all, I'd like to make a welcome to John Goodwin, David Simmons and Richard Blakeway from the Housing Ombudsman's office, and for their benefit, can I just ask everybody to quickly do a quick introduction to say who you are. I'm Mike Ainsley, Chair of the Board.
I'm Bob MacDonald, I'm Vice Chair of the Board.
I'm Lucy Kerr, I'm one of the councillors.
Can you stick the lamp on for me?
I'm Shan Shepherd. Who am I? Sorry.
Chair of Governance.
I've come from sort of one of those days where I've kind of like been rushing around. So yeah, I'm Chair of Governance and obviously on the main board, and also Vice Chair of the Operational Board.
Right.
I'm Ian MacDonald, I'm an independent board member, and I also chair the Audit Committee and the Health and Safety Forum.
My name's Alan Graves, I'm one of the councillor representatives.
Councillor Roy Webb, and I'm Cabinet Member for Adults, Health and Housing for the city.
I'm Rachel North, I'm Student Director for Communities and Place at the City Council.
Hi Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Hello, I'm Maria Murphy, Managing Director of Derby Homes.
Hi, I'm David Endicott. I'm the Finance Director and Company Secretary for Derby Homes.
Hello, I'm Claire Marabani. I'm Director of Housing Services at Derby Homes.
Hello,
Oh, go on.
sorry, go on.
I was just Jen Lake-Nanable, Tenant Board Director.
I'm Jackie Mitchell, Governance Services Manager at Derby Homes.
I'm Annabelle Barwick, Customer Service and Equalities Manager at Derby Homes.
Is that everybody? Okay.
Sorry, Mike, me too. I just dropped out there.
Right.
I'm Councillor Sarah Russell, Vice Chair of the Board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Let's say a particular welcome to Richard, David and John. And the first item on the agenda is a presentation on the Housing Ombudsman's complaint handling code. If I could just remind people, if you're not actually speaking, if you could mute your microphones to stop any background noise coming in. I'll hand over. Is it David, are you going to do the presentation?
Everyone, yeah, can you see me and hear me okay?
We can hear you.
And you, just a sec. I know. Can you see me all right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
We can hear you clearly, can't see you.
I know John's having trouble getting in as well. I've got him on the mobile, so he's trying to get in.
Yeah, we've got a message that John is not using Skype for business, so he's having problems. But yourself?
I made it. Rick made it.
Well,
Dave, do you want to say just?
We can see you, right. Okay, right.
Do you want me to say a couple of words?
Yes, please.
There you are, Dave. Can see you. Do you want, Dave? Okay. Do you want me to say a couple of words first, and then?
Yes, please. Thank you for joining us. It's a great honour that you were actually joining our board meeting. So thank you very much.
Hey, not at all. Well, look, we're delighted to be here, well, Mike, look, thanks very much, and I'll just say a couple of things, which is, firstly, it's great to be here, and a big thank you for welcoming Dave, John, and myself. There's obviously a lot happening in terms of the Housing Ombudsman and our development, but also the wider landscape around housing redress and social housing, and we'll touch on that. Dave will touch on that during the presentation. When we published the code back in the summer, it was seeking to address two kind of key things. One is the ambition of many landlords that we hear who come to us and say, we want to do, we really want to look at our complaints matter, we want to deliver a great service, we want to learn where issues go wrong, what can we do? What does good look like? So the code touches on that, but it also addresses some of the stuff, and Dave will talk about this in more detail, some of the stuff which came up through the Green Paper, post-Grenfell, and you see reflected in the White Paper, just about, some residents who find the complaint process difficult to navigate, difficult to access. So it seeks to try and address both of those kind of issues, and provide a kind of common approach across the sector, a common definition of a complaint, a common approach to handling. One of the really important things, though, about it is getting the right culture and is promoting learning. And it's brilliant that your board is interested in that and interested in this, and it says a lot to me that you come together and you want to hear about the code at your board meeting, because boards have such a critical role to play in setting that culture, the right culture around complaint handling, and promoting and demonstrating the learning from complaints. And so I think the board's role cannot be underestimated in terms of the code and this piece of work. So that's all I wanted to say, and Dave will take over.
Thanks, Rick. I will. I was supposed to be sharing this presentation with John. He was supposed to be doing the second half, but fingers crossed he's going to turn up, folks. Okay. So is there an opportunity to share the slides? Would somebody be able to get those up? Brilliant. Thank you. If you have, Mike, I can just put them up in front of me and talk, but it just makes...
Right. Is
Paul's just coming back.
I think he's back.
Okay.
Right, that's all right. Annabelle's just put a note on. Yeah, Annabelle's on it.
Are you okay? As I said, I've literally got it on my desktop, and I can bring it up and speak from that. But it just means you won't be able to see it.
Yeah, I think Annabelle's going to try it. Are you, Annabelle? If not, I can do it.
One of you, okay.
Have a race.
I think you might win, David. I'm still going to search for it.
Can somebody email the presentation and somebody who's sort of on the inside put it up?
Well,
that's what David's trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me know if you can see it.
Hey, well done, David.
Hey, well done, David. Okay, right. Okay, I'll hand back to you then, David.
Well done, folks. It wasn't me that put that up, so I don't know who's managed to do that, but thank you. So, yeah, if you could move along to the next slide, please, that would be great. So I'm just going to start off by just giving you a little bit of background to the Ombudsman service, just to put this into context. So we've got a membership of just under 2,500 landlords. So it's mandatory for all housing associations and all local authorities to be members of the Housing Ombudsman scheme. And we also have some voluntary private member landlords. That's 73 at present. So we obviously have potential to expand further into the private sector. So that's quite a large reach, 2,500 landlords, and we just cover England. So our powers are statutory and our decisions are binding. So we have reserved powers to take landlords to court in the event that they don't comply with our orders. Now, I'm quite an old campaigner at the Ombudsman. I've been there nearly 14 years, and there's never been an instance where a landlord hasn't complied with one of our orders, I'm pleased to say. But we do have those reserved powers in the event that we come across a landlord that doesn't comply with our orders. So we differ from other landlord services in that we have a dual role. We have the traditional role of investigating complaints like other Ombudsman services, but we have a secondary role of enabling effective dispute resolution by others. So we aim to equip residents and landlords to be able to resolve disputes between themselves without having that reliance upon us. And we see ourselves as being much wider, our role as being much broader than just a dispute resolution service. And that is reflected in our vision, which, as it says there, is to improve lives and housing services. And we hope to do that through using the insight and knowledge that we gain from complaints by hoping to influence and shape the services that are provided in the sector. And to achieve that, we need to be proactive, which we are. We actively promote learning from complaints. We deliver bespoke training to landlords, both in-house and in partnership with other organisations in the sector, such as TPAS and HQN. And we focus in on some pretty specialist areas, such as antisocial behaviour, managing challenging behaviours, as well as complaints about repairs. And we've recently put together a workshop about how to effectively write a complaint response letter. So we also undertake systemic investigations, both with individual landlords and on a wider sector-wide basis as well. And we also look at thematic issues, and this is something we're hoping to do more frequently. We recently released a thematic report which was based on new build, leasehold and shared ownership properties, and we've been running a series of webinars on the back of that, and we're hoping to produce quarterly thematic reports going forward and to run a series of webinars on the back of those to really share that knowledge and insight. So on the next slide here then, just to give you some sort of indication of the volume of correspondence that we deal with at the Ombudsman, last financial year we dealt with around 15,000 pieces of correspondence and inquiries. Of those, 2,138 formal decisions were made through formal investigations, and that involved us making 1,618 orders, as it says there, and around 1,000 recommendations to resolve disputes. And we also thought you'd be interested to see the categories of complaints that we receive, and you're probably not surprised there to see responsive repairs flying high at number one, 38%. It's consistently been that way in the 13 years I've been at the Ombudsman service, and that has always been followed closely by tenant behaviour, which is antisocial behaviour, and you can see that's there at 14%. So that sort of gives you an idea of the volumes we deal with and the categories of complaints that we receive as well. Okay, next slide please. So I'm just going to talk about the complaint handling code. So that's a bit about the Ombudsman. So the code is really what we're here to talk to you about today. And I think first of all it's important to put it into context and talk about where the idea for a complaint handling code came from. And we need to go back to the Green Paper, which, as you know, the top to bottom review of social housing that took place following the Grenfell tragedy. And that paper was 5 pages. One chapter was dedicated to complaints handling, and that chapter highlighted some of the concerns that residents had expressed when it came to actually raising a complaint, and some of those are listed here. So residents said they found it difficult to access the internal complaints procedure, and this really boiled down to the fact that there weren't enough routes available for them through which they could raise a complaint, and they were having to go to unreasonable lengths to speak to somebody or to get their complaint registered. Now, this wasn't helped by the fact that complaints procedures were overly complex. They didn't understand how to get from one stage to the next, and that includes how to get onto a third party for an independent review, such as the Ombudsman service. Residents also said there was a great inconsistency between complaints procedures. They varied from one stage to four stage, and the response times within those complaints procedures differed considerably as well. They also said it took too long, and that was ultimately the problem. It took too long to get from start to finish when they got some kind of justice, and because of that, residents felt they were unable to hold their landlords to account. And as it says there, we were awaiting the right paper, but as you are fully aware, that was published earlier this month. So the Ombudsman's experience, it's important to draw on that when we're talking about why we came up with a complaint handling code. So at the Ombudsman, we've also experienced delays in landlords engaging with residents. So we've experienced them simply ignoring residents or unreasonably delaying in responding. We've also experienced them not accepting or escalating complaints and not providing a valid, fair reason for taking that course of action. So we came up with a concept that we would introduce a complaint handling code for the sector, and we came up with that code in consultation with the sector as well. And we were conscious that that consultation should involve an equal proportion of tenant and landlord representation. So we put together an external working group, and some of the organisations involved in that group are listed here. So TPAS and Taro, for example, very resident focused. There were also some senior members of staff from a number of landlords on that resident group, as well as some of the neutral partners in housing, such as Chartered Institute of Housing and Housemart. And we all got together, came up with a concept of what the code should look like and what should be included within it. We came up with a rough draft internally, which we then put out back to the external working group. And the final version of the code was published on our website on the 7th of July. So obviously the aims of the code is to address directly some of those issues highlighted by residents in the Green Paper, and also to provide a good quality complaints handling framework for the sector. And it's not to catch anybody out, it's to make things better for all. And it is also not just for landlords. The intention is that this is a reference point for residents as well, so they can understand how to raise a complaint and what they can expect from their landlord's internal complaints procedure. So then the code is split up into a number of sections. It covers definition, and I'll leave you to read that, but some of the important aspects of this definition, it talks about complaints being however made, and by that we're hoping to draw away from some of those landlords that still insist on complaints being made in writing, for example. We still have some landlords that insist that complainants log on, create an account and submit their complaint that way. So this is really in keeping with the wider principles promoted by the code in terms of accessibility. There's also a part in the complaint definition which talks about the actions of third parties, and this makes it clear that we expect landlords to take responsibility for the actions of third parties or contractors acting on their behalf, because we often see landlords try and distance themselves from the actions of those third parties. So this section of the code also says that residents should not unreasonably be denied the opportunity to raise a complaint. The word complaint doesn't have to be explicitly used in order for a complaint to be treated as such as well. And it also says that landlords' staff should know the difference between a complaint and a service request. So the next part of the code talks about a requirement to improve access. So landlords are now required to provide a variety of channels. Sorry, do you mind taking the slide back one? I've got one more bullet point after this one. They're required now to provide a variety of routes through which residents can raise formal complaints. So essentially it should be as easy as possible to meaningfully engage with a landlord to raise a complaint and try and get that issue resolved. There's also a requirement with the code for landlords to make sure that residents are aware of the complaints procedure. They are required to publish details about that widely, and there is a specific requirement for that now to be put on a landlord's website. The code also asks landlords to make residents aware that they can contact the Ombudsman at any stage. So traditionally landlords will advise residents they can contact the Ombudsman once they've completed the internal complaints procedure, because of course that is when a case comes within our formal remit. But our dispute resolution process is heavily weighted towards the front end to try and help residents and landlords resolve disputes between themselves whilst the complaint is going through the complaints procedure. So that is why we ask landlords to make residents aware they can contact us at any point. And I might add the same applies to landlords. You can contact us at any point for advice and guidance and for a steer as to how to resolve a dispute. You don't have to have a case registered with us. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so the code's quite general in terms of the principles that it promotes, and it does provide for a lot of discretion as well, but it is prescriptive where we think it matters the most. Where we thought more consistency and more clarity was needed as to how complaints were addressed across the sectors. This is where we get prescriptive. And firstly, the number of stages. The code promotes a 2-stage internal complaints procedure. There is provision for a 3rd stage in instances where landlords think that is needed. And a good reason for that could be, for example, if you have a resident panel at stage 3. The code heavily promotes resident involvement. But ideally, we want to see a 2-stage process adopted across the sector. It's also prescriptive about timeframes. It asks for a 10-day response time at stage 1 and 20 days at stage 2. But there is provision to extend those timeframes by 10 days at each stage and beyond that in circumstances where landlords think further time is needed. So we're hoping here that we struck the right balance between making sure that landlords treat complaints with more priority and deal with them more quickly, but also that they have that additional time in instances where they need that to be able to gather the necessary information to be able to address that complaint properly. Because what we wouldn't want to see happening is landlords hitting these target response times at the expense of actually dealing with the complaint properly and trying to resolve it. So the code also talks about fairness in complaint handling and having a resident-focused approach, and by this we mean making sure residents are given the opportunity to express their side of the argument before any decision is reached. It also talks about making sure residents have the opportunity to be accompanied on meetings, for example, or have the opportunity to be represented in taking their complaint forward in instances where they're not able or not comfortable to do that themselves. There's also a section on putting things right, and we're talking about remedies here. Now, this section of the code talks about things you should take into account when putting forward an effective remedy. It talks about time and trouble, distress and inconvenience. Are any statutory payments due? Has the resident incurred any actual losses? Those kinds of things. It also talks about what an effective remedy should include, so not least an apology, an explanation as to why something's gone wrong, and a demonstration of learning. So the code aims to promote a positive complaint handling culture from top to bottom. We want people to be open and accountable when it comes to complaints as opposed to partial and defensive. And as I said before, a positive complaint handling culture, as far as we're concerned, is one that involves residents either at a scrutiny level or in consultation with the formulation of policies and procedures, or as part of the dispute resolution process itself. So finally, the code promotes learning and improvement. This is something we've always promoted at the Ombudsman Service, and that is reinforced and comes across loud and clear in the complaint handling code. We encourage landlords to use complaints as a source of intel, to learn from those and to put in place positive changes in service. And there is now a requirement for landlords to share that learning widely with residents, with a specific requirement for that to be included in their annual reports. Okay, next slide, please. Unless John's there, these are the slides I've prepared for. Are you there, John?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, mate. Okay, I'll hand over to you.
Can everyone hear me okay? I think so. Hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah. I can hear you. Yes, thank you, John.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm really sorry about the technical problems. Dave and I have done dozens of webinars, training events, workshops since lockdown last March. But I think this is the first one we've done on Skype, so we're a bit rusty. Not sure I've ever used Skype before at work, so apologies for that. But we're in now, and I hope you can hear me. Yeah, there's a few more slides. I wanted to say something about changes we've made to the Housing Ombudsman scheme, and then about the timetable for implementing our changes, and then a bit at the end about the white paper. I suspect you may already be familiar with the white paper, or perhaps you're going to discuss it later, so I won't spend too long on that. The Housing Ombudsman scheme, you're probably aware, that's our overarching document. It's our governing document, sets out what we do, how we do it, and all social landlords, including yourselves, have to be members of the Housing Ombudsman scheme. So we've got about 2,300 members in England. We just cover England. We've got all the local authorities and all the registered social landlords. So the scheme is very important, and we have updated it and we have strengthened it in ways that we think will improve our ability to resolve complaints and the standard of complaint handling across the sector. So the new scheme came into effect recently, 1st of September. It's on our website. Do have a look at it. But I'll just highlight the key changes. We're just going to do this one slide on it, so I'm not going to go into great detail. But there is a significant change. I should say, first of all, that how we investigate day-to-day complaints won't change dramatically. People can still go through your complaints procedure, bring a complaint to us, we will investigate it in the usual way and issue a decision. But there are significant changes. The first one is we're going to have a new wider power to carry out a systemic investigation where we think there's evidence of systemic failing. So what that means is, in the past, we've very much focused on individual issues brought to us by individual residents. So it might be about a leak or damp, or it might be a group of residents, but they're complaining about the same issue, which might be, a leak from the roof of a block of flats, for example. So we're still going to do that in future, but we will also be able to carry out a wider investigation if we see a pattern of complaints against the same landlord that we're upholding. So it might be over the course of a year we see a number of complaints about gas servicing or about the repair service. Then we would might want to look in more detail about what's happening at that landlord. Is there something going wrong systemically? And if we find there is, we would then report that to the regulator of social housing. So we'd work closely with them on that. We could also carry out a wider investigation if the same issue was coming up across a number of landlords. If a number of landlords were not meeting their gas servicing targets, for example, we could look into that. Or we could look at an issue across the whole sector. So it's an interesting new area. I'm going to be involved in that. We're just at the early stages of working out our policies and procedures for doing that. The next big change in the new Housing Ombudsman scheme is, of course, about the complaint handling code, which Dave has explained. So in future, landlords are not just required to be members of the scheme and to comply with it, but the scheme says that they must comply with guidance issued by us. So the good complaint handling code is a piece of guidance issued by us. So it's a requirement to comply with it. And underpinning that, we have a new power to issue what are called complaint handling failure orders. So if something's going wrong in an organisation's complaint handling, if we think a landlord should be, for example, escalating a complaint or isn't responding quickly enough, we obviously will give them the opportunity to do so, we'll ask them to do so, but ultimately we can issue an order there and then requiring them to take some action to progress that complaint. So that's the main changes. If we can move on. Yeah, the implementation timetable briefly. The code was issued in July. The new scheme came into effect in September, so everything's very recent here. But there is an introductory period, because obviously we couldn't expect people to just, get everything right on day one and change any policies and procedures. So there's an interim period up to the 31st of December, by when we expect landlords to have carried out a self-assessment of how they're performing against the complaint handling code and changed any procedures they needed to make sure they're complying with the code by the 31st December. So that self-assessment, perhaps you're already doing it or you've already done it. We expect the latest version of it to be published by the 31st December. You might want to do several versions along the way, do one at the beginning to check where you're at, and then a final version to see if you've made all the changes. It's up to you. It's a tool there for you to use. And we expect the outcome of that self-assessment to be reported to elected members of councils, but also to boards such as Almo, boards such as yourself. There is a backstop at 31st of March if any sort of bigger policies, such as corporate policies within the council, need to be updated, because we realise that that can sometimes take a longer time. And during this interim period, so we won't be issuing formal complaint handling failure orders until the 1st of January, but we will be issuing what we call shadow complaint handling orders. So we will say, well, this is an order that we would be formally making after the 1st of January. So this is really what you should be doing, and you need to get your processes in line with this. And finally, I think it's really important, because a lot of this sounds as if there's lots of sticks involved rather than carrots, that we've got lots of new powers. We do want to work with landlords and with residents to resolve disputes. That's our primary goal. We will be flexible, we will be reasonable, and we'll look to try and resolve complaints. We do realise, for example, 2 complaints are not the same. A complaint about a dripping tap you might be able to reply to within 5 days, 7 days, if it's a leak, but if it's about 2 years of antisocial behaviour, it's going to take you quite a bit longer to get all the necessary information, contact the different organisations involved. So there'll be some flexibility as long as you keep the resident updated and agree a new timescale with them. Okay, we've got one slide here just about the role of boards. This would apply to any board, but it's housing association or an ALMO. And I suspect these are things you know, so I don't want you to teach you how to suck eggs. You probably know what you're doing. But in terms of complaints, these are the issues where we think boards can make a real difference. Dave mentioned earlier culture, and I think that's really important. Some organisations, most organisations I think now, have quite a good complaint handling culture. They understand that complaints are a useful source of information, and they welcome complaints. You still get some, and there were a lot more of them when I started in housing, who don't take that approach, are very defensive about complaints, don't want to admit to getting anything wrong. So we very much welcome an open, transparent culture, and I think that is going to come from the board downwards. So it's the board that can set that culture. The board needs to ensure there's senior level ownership of complaints, learning from complaints, and accountability for taking action in response to complaints, particularly when something's gone wrong. Obviously, that's an operational issue, but the board needs to make sure that that's taking place. The board obviously has a scrutiny role, needs to ask the right questions, be informed, and allow time to consider complaints. However you do that, you might get an annual report, 6 monthly report, I'm not sure. But what we would emphasise there is I think there was a history within some housing organisations when they looked at complaints reports of very much looking at performance indicators around timescales. So to say, how many complaints did we answer within 10 days or 20 days? And obviously that is important, but what that overlooks is the quality of the response. Did we resolve the complaint? Did we respond appropriately? Which is perhaps even more important. So I think we would make sure that you're getting that information to look at, as well as the timescale information. Boards should make sure there's a process in place to see if there's any risks highlighted from complaints. Complaints can be an early warning of something going wrong in quite a serious area, such as gas safety. So if you've got a number of complaints around that, that may suggest there's a problem with your annual gas safety inspections. I suppose cladding is another issue coming up at the moment. We're getting some complaints coming to us about cladding. So do look out for those high-risk issues. Review our annual report. This is something that we're going to be publishing for the first time. Next month in December, we're going to issue an annual report on each landlord's performance over the last 3 years. So how many findings of maladministration have we made against them, for example, and how does that compare with the average in the sector or the average for local authorities or housing associations. So those will be coming out in December. It would be a useful thing, I would suggest, for boards to look at, compare with yourselves with others, ask questions around that. And finally, I mentioned learning earlier, but I think we really emphasise the need to learn from complaints. It's the part that often gets overlooked. People move on to dealing with the next complaint rather than learning from what went wrong. So that approach needs also to be set from the board downwards. Okay, so I will not spend too long on, last two slides are around the white paper, which I say you may have discussed or you may be going to discuss, but I'll just pull out a few highlights here from our point of view of things that either directly or indirectly affect us. It's published last week. There is a proposal already. The government said there's various things they've already done. One is to propose to remove the democratic filter. That's the requirement for a complainant to wait 8 weeks before they come to us, unless during that period they go to an MP, councillor or tenant panel. We can go into it later if you want to ask any questions. Our view is that hasn't worked effectively, and it's really just been slightly bureaucratic delay for residents to bring the complaint to us. So the government has proposed in the Building Safety Bill to remove that. And the government has already given us extra powers. I mentioned the scheme there, that's been agreed by the government, and we've had extra funding this year. So we are expanding our services. We're going to be able to do lots more work with residents and landlords to support dispute resolution. And we aim to halve our decision times, get them down from what's currently just below 6 months to 3 months by March 2022. I hope I've got those timescales right. If I haven't, Rick will correct me because he's the man in charge. And finally, the government's already given us increased powers, so that's in the scheme, and very much supports the introduction of the complaint handling code. Proposals in the white paper include supporting improved complaint handling by landlords through further stronger powers. We're going to have the complaint handling failure orders in January. Strengthening the relationship between us and the regulator. So there's quite a lot in the white paper that relates to the regulator, and we will be working even more closely with the regulator. We have a good relationship at the moment, but we will be working more closely. We're also going to be publishing not just those landlord reports, which I mentioned, which we plan to do in December, but by March we're going to be publishing our investigation reports, which we don't publish at the moment. And finally, there is a proposal, this isn't necessarily for us, but we may be involved in it, that the government will run an awareness campaign so residents know their rights and how to complain. So that will be interesting. It may be something we're involved in. And the final slide is really highlighting some of the, if we can move on to the final one, I think. That's it. These aren't things that directly affect us other than the first one. So the first one is there's a proposal for an access to information scheme for housing associations. So housing associations aren't covered by Freedom of Information Act. This would effectively give their residents the right to ask for information, as people can to public bodies, and we would be the body overseeing that, checking that have been complied with, dealing with any appeals. So that'll be interesting. It's a whole new area of work for us. The next 3 points there are really around the increased role of the regulator of social housing, who are going to be much more involved in not just setting consumer standards of day-to-day housing for social housing tenants, but also in checking those standards, carrying out annual reviews, desktop reviews, but also some risk-based inspections and 4 yearly inspections of larger landlords, which is quite interesting. So it's going back to a form of inspection regime, but I'm sure nothing on the scale of the previous Audit Commission inspection regime, which was my previous job. I was an inspector at the Audit Commission. Usually if I say that, people look a bit dubious because they were very pleased to see the back of the Audit Commission. I suspect you might not be like that, because I think you were one of the first 2 landlords to get 3 stars from the Audit Commission, and that led to your Almo funding. So hopefully you're happy to see me. I wasn't involved in the inspection though. The last couple of points, there's a proposal to review the Decent Home Standard and perhaps extend that into areas such as green spaces around properties, energy efficiency, so beyond the bricks and mortar issues. The white paper also has a proposal for better information for residents who are facing antisocial behaviour. It's a particular problem that's been growing during the pandemic, reports of antisocial behaviour. Residents don't always know who to contact or what support is available. Finally, there's the introduction of right to shared ownership for housing association residents. It's slightly more limited than that. It's for new properties that are grant funded. Some of these will be quite interesting to know how you're going to respond, because I understand you as an ALMA, you're managing the council's stock, but you also have some of your own directly owned stock which you're a registered social landlord for. So I imagine some of these things you will effectively have the role of a housing association, but for most of them you're managing the local authority's stock. That's more than enough from me and from us, I think. I don't know, would you like to ask us any questions? Or
Thank you very much, John and Dave. Are there any comments or any questions to anybody? Anybody
I'd like
wish
to ask a question, please, Mike, if that's all right?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Hi. Oh, there, you can probably hear me now. Hi, stage. So, it was interesting what you heard about the decent home standard being linked to green spaces around a person's property, kind of in the environment, and I'd be quite interested to learn more about that if there's an opportunity to, because it links quite into a standard model that the NHS are using called social prescribing at the moment, which is very much about using non-clinical pharmaceutical methods to increase health and well-being. And I think actually that would be a really interesting thing for you to think about and link into if there was an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, Rick might know more about this than me if he's still with us. There's not a lot of detail in the white paper, so I can't give you much detail. And it's not an area we would be directly involved in. But as you probably know, the Decent Home Standard it's good that there is one, but it is a fairly basic standard, the original Decent Home Standard, about the age of kitchens, bathrooms, etc. So it is talking about reviewing that, bringing it up to date, but also extending it, as you say, beyond the property. Exactly what that would involve, I don't know. Our involvement would be, I suppose, if someone had a complaint that their property didn't meet that standard, so that could come to us. Yeah. I don't know, is Rick's there? If Rick's there, he might want to add to that.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
John.
Oh, yeah, I'm here, and that's absolutely right. I mean, it's one which the ministry, I guess, will lead, and so I would have thought if at some point they're going to want a dialogue with landlords around what does that successor standard look like, and so there should be an opportunity for you to directly engage with the ministry around it. I'm not sure I can really add much more than what John said. I mean, I think there's we obviously have information on the kind of things that we see going wrong that, which you could look at and might inform what you do around a successor standard, but really it's much broader and high level than that. So I think one for the ministry, I think, for you to talk to them about it.
Right, thank you. Lucy, you wanted to make a comment, ask a question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of points, thank you. The first thing is, how does it stand regarding complaints that don't come from tenants but come from nearby residents? So it might be somebody who lives on an estate where they've got a house that has been sold, but they're concerned about the care of the estate. Or it could be somebody who's in a property experiencing antisocial behaviour. Do you have a role in that as well?
No. Shall I pick that? We only accept complaints from people who have an arrangement to occupy premises owned or managed by a member landlord, and the complaint has to be about a member. Those are the two mandatory grounds that have to be met to bring a complaint to us. So if you're talking about somebody who wants to complain about a social housing tenant who isn't a social housing tenant themselves, then that wouldn't fall within our jurisdiction, unfortunately. We wouldn't be able to look at it. So we often, on the reverse, we often get complaints about antisocial behaviour being caused by non-landlord tenants as well. Now, we can look at those, provided those complaints are from landlord tenants, but obviously we can only look at those with a view that we know the landlord has very limited action that it can take and no authority over those residents. So we would still expect a landlord to look at that, but that's with a view that it's very limited to what it can actually do.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Sorry. I was just going to add that although, as Dave says, we can't look at complaints from non-member residents, but a lot of landlords do allow for that in their own complaints procedure. So that would be up to you. I don't know what your complaints procedure says. I did have a look at it, but I didn't read it in detail. So some landlords will take those complaints through its own complaints procedure, but the person wouldn't then have a right to bring it to the Ombudsman.
Okay, that's fine. Now, my other question, I think you'll probably also tell me this is beyond your remit, is looking at your systemic failures or opportunities, I'd like to think instead, regarding allocations policies. Do you cover anything on the allocations policies? Vic's shaking his head there as well.
Yeah, it's local government ombudsman.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Up until when Dave and I started the Ombudsman, which was before 2013, we dealt only with housing association complaints. 2013, we took on local authorities, ALMOs, but only the housing management side, not homelessness or allocations, which can cause some confusion for residents.
Okay, thank you, John. Just for clarification, if people can't see the chat bar, Annabelle has clarified that we do accept and investigate complaints from non-tenants.
Right.
Okay, Maria, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, firstly, guys, can I just say thank you, because I thought your presentation was really helpful, and that's from an officer's point of view, not a board member. I mean, I'm wondering whether the Housing Ombudsman Service is, or it would want to work with landlords to actually do more on preventing complaints in the first place, because what we should all be aiming for is treating our customers in such a way and delivering a service in such a way that complaints don't become necessary. Because I'm a real believer that as a human being delivering a service to another human being, our antennae of whether somebody is happy or not with the job we've done, we should be able to flag it up pretty damn quickly. And I think that's where the work's to be done. And whether we badge it under culture or whether we badge it under whatever, for me, that is the next step. Because I love complaints, and Annabelle will probably say I'm a nuisance, because I actually quite like to see quite a high percentage of the complaints that we get, because it tells me a lot about what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. But it still troubles me that I look at so many things and think, oh, that should never have even been a complaint. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you've given any thought to any training for organisations that could help us with that.
Well, can I pick up on that, Rick? Because actually, I'm sector development lead. John and I actually do all the training. That is something we do. And just to put it into context, because I've been at the Ombudsman a long time, so when I first joined, which is going back some time now, we were a very reactive service. We didn't have a dual role at that point. We just focused on investigations. So our process was heavily geared towards the formal investigation at the end. That's what we were all about. We did no work up to that point. It was just about trying to get the resident and the landlord through the process without any input. And we've gone a heck of a long way from that. Now our dispute resolution process is more focused, there's more resource at the front end, and there's far more focus on early and local resolution. And that's what we're trying to achieve in the sector. And the benefits of that are the relationships between residents and landlords that are ongoing. So the more disputes that can be resolved early and locally, the better the relationship. The more learning from complaints, the better the service provision. So that is part of our role. We're aiming to equip landlords and residents to be able to resolve disputes between themselves. And the complaint handling code, I have to say, I love it, because I think it is one of the best things we've done. And we've put that out there in the sector to enable us to try and achieve that aim. And we're hoping that's just going to make the handling complaints and raising a complaint so much easier. And it's going to aid that early and local resolution. But we're very active in the sector, promoting what we do, sharing our insight. We used to sit on all this knowledge, because we're in quite a unique position at the Ombudsman. We see across the board how landlords deal with complaints. And we used to just keep that knowledge to ourselves. Now we are actively putting it out there, sharing it, promoting it. You know, we're running workshops. Since we went virtual, I think John and I have done we must have done about 45 workshops and webinars. You know, we do lots of in-house training. So I'd be happy to take up Derby Homes for some training if you were interested in that.
Yeah, we'll have a chat outside of the meeting, Dave, because I'll get told off if I carry on. But definitely pick that one up with you. That'd be great.
I can carry on. I'll stop now before I get told off as well.
Okay. Jen, you wanted to come back on a point that Lucy made.
Yeah, hi, I did. As Maria and Annabelle know, I've got quite a lot to say about complaints already. I just wanted to share that I have had to make quite a long complaint about antisocial behaviour as a non-tenant, and it was a while ago, but I think that culture thing that Maria talked about was really important, because in both instances where I've had to complain as a tenant and as a non-tenant, there was a real... As a tenant, it had to get to the point where I had to make a very formal and well-documented complaint, and I think the problem is that lots of people wouldn't necessarily have the skill set to do what I did. As a non-tenant, I found that there wasn't really a clear process for people to follow, and I think the fact that the Housing Ombudsman doesn't actually account for that group is something which is actually a really big omission in your in the services that you offer. I appreciate it may not be in your remit to correct that. I just wanted to comment, Dave, I actually do a lot of equality and diversity training, and I think if there's an opportunity to do it, would be really valuable to get some people who have been through a complaints process and had good and bad experiences, because I've actually found in my work in the NHS that if you can get people with that lived experience, that expertise from being in the damp house, not being understood, can really add a huge amount of impact for people who are kind of sitting on the other side. So that's just what I wanted to say to finish off. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Jen. Any other questions and comments on what Dave, John, Rick have said? Okay. We'd appreciate if you could just stay with us for a while Annabelle takes us through our response to this, and we welcome any comments. So hand over to you, Annabelle.
Thank you very much. I think the guys have actually set the scene really, really well for me. Obviously, the complaint handling code was launched in the summer this year, and we've been working towards making sure that our policies reflect that and we meet the code. We've worked with John and Dave, and they've been really, really helpful. They've critiqued our policy, which was a bit cheeky of us to ask, but we did, and they came back to us, and that was great. If you don't try, you don't get, do you, in this game? So we've made some changes to our complaints policy in line with the code. I've spoken to, we've had some email communication with Jen, who's been really, really helpful, and that we are still kind of looking at some of the elements relating to fairness and equality and individual need, which I think is important, but not just in this policy, but in every policy we do. It needs to be across the board, and as Maria noted earlier, by the time somebody's made a complaint, we've done something wrong earlier down the line, and if we can get that right, there will be a reduction in complaints. Not that we don't see complaints as a gift, because we do, because we learn from them. So really what we've done is to make changes to the existing complaints policy in line with the critique from the Housing Ombudsman, and to implement a few things. I'll take you through the main points. So we've adopted the universal definition of a complaint. We've looked at ensuring easy access to our complaints procedure. Jen did point out to us very rightly that actually our full policy wasn't on the website. It is on the website as of today, However, we're in between websites and we're going to launch a new one very soon. So hopefully once we've got all of this policy approved, we'll have it all singing or dancing on the new website. We communicate to our customers their right to access the Housing Ombudsman service at any time on our website. It's going in Derby Homes News, the next edition. We also put it on all of our complaint letters, but I think that's something that we can reiterate further through our managers' briefings, so that actually the early dispute resolution tool is used much widely, and we really promote that. It's really, really helpful. We probably annoy the Housing Ombudsman because we do ring them quite a lot. We've structured the complaints procedure. We only had 2 stages. We took the decision, I think it was probably 2 years ago, to remove the 3rd stage. However, we do have information about designated people that we put in our 2nd stage outcome letter as well. We really want a resident-focused process. We've actually asked our customer voice, our tenant panel, to look at our self-assessment for us, and we have a meeting with them on the 9th of December to try and look at, we might think it's easy to make a complaint, but actually as a customer, is it easy to make a complaint, and are there any other things we could do? Are there parts of our procedure that we can make more customer friendly? Take action to put things right with appropriate remedies. We review that. We've actually recently updated our compensation policy that's going to the operational board next week to try and kind of accommodate that. And not underestimate the value of saying sorry and actually meaning that you are sorry for what's happened. Create a positive complaint handling culture through continuous learning and improvement. I'm not saying we're brilliant at continuous learning, but that's something we definitely need to improve on and put structures in place. And it's about sharing across the organisation, because we may learn something in one area, but if we don't share it across the whole organisation, you're losing a trick there. We're going to put it in our annual reports. That will be our next year's annual report. And as I said earlier, we're working on our self-assessment document. We have had the NFA policy officer had a look at it. She come back with some comments. They actually aligned with many of the comments that Jen actually provided to us about equality, fairness and access and reasonable adjustments, etc. And as I said, we're taking that to the customer voice in December to get their feedback as well. So that will be hopefully on our brand new website by the 31st of December. If not, it will be on our old website by the 31st of December. The couple of other things we've changed. We've extended the stage 2 response time to 20 days. We were at 10 days before. So we've actually used what the code gave us to give us more time to properly investigate stage 2. By the time something's been escalated to stage 2, there's a lot of unpicking to be had. There's a lot of groundwork with the customer and a lot of information that needs to be investigated. We obviously put Housing Ombudsman details on all of our complaint letters, and we have changed a couple of things. So we now consider complaints from leaseholders, which we didn't before. Obviously, if they're service charge related, the Ombudsman has advised us, other than service charge, that they would look at it. If it is just service charge, I think it goes to the first tier tribunal. We have implemented a restricted contact, well, we've written a restricted contact policy, and we had previously had a vexatious policy, and the Housing Ombudsman advised us that the terminology of vexatious wasn't really embraced by customers. So we've looked at, and we're still working on that policy to add a little bit more in from the comments that Jen and Maria we've looked at in relation to fairness, reasonable adjustments and accessibility. And one thing that we have done is remove the petitions process and procedure and incorporated group complaints rather than a petition. I think looking at the code, we actually stood back and thought, why did we have a petitions procedure? Why is it different than a complaint? It's a complaint just from a number of people. So we've taken that out as well. And that's basically everything that I wanted to present to you tonight, if that's okay.
Thanks, Annabelle. Before I open it up, any comments from Dave, John, Rick?
Yeah, it's good to hear the changes. I did actually look at the policy, and I did know one of the things I did pick out was the petitions and why you had a separate route to take those complaints and how they differed from group complaints. So I'm glad you took that on board, and it sounds like you made some positive changes. Is all I can say to that.
We took all your comments on board, Dave. Don't worry.
I had a look at the policy today on your website. I didn't realise it only went on today, so you got away with that. If it's still
yeah, that's the old policy as well, not the new one. So,
but I was quite impressed because as you said, it says you can contact us at any time, which is something that's in the code, but a lot of landlords don't realise that we have that role, so they don't include that on the website. So yeah, that was really good. And also, yes, it's good that you're changing the wording from vexatious policy, which a lot of landlords do call it their vexatious complaints policy. We find that just makes people even more vexatious. So call it something neutral. You can have the same content, but if the title's more neutral, perhaps it de-escalates the issue. But yeah, I was quite impressed by what's on your website at the moment.
Thank you both for that positive feedback. Jen, you wanted I know you raised some questions beforehand. Do you want to come in?
Sorry, I'm just switching my video.
Jen?
No, other than to say, I think Annabelle and Maria...
We can hardly hear you, Jen.
Oh. Sorry, let's move that down. Is that better?
That's a lot better, thank you. Yeah.
Just to say that Annabelle and Maria responded very quickly and appropriately, and there's been an invitation to do some further work on the policies. I'll happily talk people through if they think there's anything relevant that I raise, but Annabelle and Maria have both got the information, so they may as well do it really in relation to what they're already presenting.
Okay, right, thank you, Jen. Lucy?
Hi,
Lucy?
I haven't been through in that measured, organised way and talked about it 2 days ago. I'm sorry about that, but I had got one or two comments, and if I can just raise them now, is that all right? I think it's about three things. Yeah. The first one is slightly funny one because it's using a colloquialism in a way that is inappropriate for its accuracy. So at the bottom of the policy statement, it says that we would do things or go the extra mile.
Okay.
Now, the actual meaning of going the extra mile is inside out to what we use it colloquially, because it comes from the Roman law that said that a Roman legionary could tell somebody to carry their pack for a mile. And this is why they had mileposts along their roads. But you couldn't get that person to carry it for another mile, because if you carry it for another mile, you're taking that person away from tilling his field or looking after his goats or whatever he was doing. And actually it's against the Roman law to get somebody to walk that extra mile. So it's quite contradictory.
So can we find on that, Chair?
Can we have a different phrase?
I think that's a point very well made, and Annabelle and I will come up with a different phrase.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lucy.
I think thank you for the late history lesson, Lucy. I think we know what we meant by going the extra mile.
Absolutely, but it's the colloquialism is just out of kilter for I don't know whatever reasons. The second thing on page, it says page 29 of our papers, but it's towards the bottom of the page headed complaints procedure. Yep. It says in circumstances where a complaint has not been resolved satisfactorily. I think it means to the complainant's satisfaction.
Yeah, that's right.
Rather than anything else. I think it just needs to be a little bit more specific. Yeah. There are a couple of places where there are links to be put in. At the bottom of the restricted contact one and the compensation goodwill gestures. And I thought it'd be helpful to have the Housing Ombudsman surface details actually at the end, even if they're there a couple of pages earlier. I think it's important that they're at the end as well with the other contacts.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, okay.
But otherwise, I didn't pick up the values-based language that Jen's commented on. I thought it was quite readable, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Anybody else wish to make any comments on this then?
Jen does.
Jen? Yes, sorry, Jen.
Hi, so I think it was in...
Jen?
Can't hear me again, sorry. I think it was in the complaints policy. It might seem like quite a small thing, but it did say that if compensation was paid, it should ideally be credited to the tenant's account. And I appreciate that there's a business case for that, but if frontline staff or complaint staff are going in with that approach and actually people have genuinely incurred loss, I'm not talking about distress here, people might feel pressured into having that credited on their account when they actually need the money now. So I just think that's I understand the business case for it in terms of if I agree, if there's debts, then it should be taken off. But if somebody's paying their account and paying it regularly, I think that they should really have the option of having that compensation paid to them for, if losses or distress have been experienced.
Yeah, we could probably be a little bit clearer on that, Jen. Where debts don't exist, we do refund it through to the tenant unless they ask for it to stay on as a credit.
Perfect.
Okay. Chair, can I just make a closing remark? Because Jen has actually been incredibly modest. The comments that she made for Annabelle and myself were very, very helpful. And we are both very grateful for the length of time that she took to go through that and forward it on. It was a really valuable piece of work. So thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Maria. If there's no more questions or comments there, can we move the recommendation and note the code and the changes? If that's agreed. If I can just then thank again Rick, John and Dave for your input this evening. As Maria said earlier, it was a very, very clear presentation, very, very useful, and I think it's putting in context what we hope to do, the important point that you made, just how important it is that the board are fully involved in this, and I hope I was going to say started on that journey, but I think we're well down it, but we will continue to move that way. So thank you very much for your input tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annabelle, for your...
we will stay in touch, don't worry. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Right. Okay, if we could carry on the agenda then to item 3. Apologies, the only apology I've got is from Sean, who's ill. I don't believe there are any late items.
Can we just ask how Sean's getting on? Is he any better?
It's a little bit better, Lucy, but not showing great improvement. I think it's just going to take time.
Yeah. Well, give us our best wishes on.
For those of you that don't know, he hasn't got COVID, he's got shingles. But he will recover.
Yeah, give him our best wishes, won't you? Yes.
I will.
Yeah. Okay. Item 5 then, are there any declarations of interest other than the usual ones? If then we could move on to the minutes of the extraordinary board meeting, and the minutes are correct. It is Tuesday the 27th of October, not the 26th as it says on the agenda, but the minutes are correct in that date. Just going through them first of all for correctness. Anything on pages 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the minutes. Do we treat those as a true record then? I'll take silence as assent. Going through...
I think probably the silence... No, I was just going to say, I think the silence, Mike, because everyone's got their
muted.
And they're also, if they're like me, they're saying yes, then realising nobody can actually hear them.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah. Right, thank you for that, Ian. I'll try and give a bit more time in future, yes. Any matters arising? Page 1, page 2, page 3, David, you've something on page 4.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Ian actually raised the point about the NHF code at the last meeting, a code of governance, that is. And it has been published now, and just to clarify, they have moved on the issue that was causing a bit of consternation about 6-9 years. They are saying that they expect 6 years as a normal maximum continuous period of office, but the extensions to 9 years would, if approved by the board, is in the interests of the board or the organisation, would be still compliant. So only when you go above 9 years are you then non-compliant, but again, even there, as already was the case, you just have to explain yourself and the reason for your non-compliance, which is the position we've always held with regard to Ian and previously with Roy.
All right. Thank you, David. Anything else on that page? On the next page, the appointments. Maria, I think you're going to give us a quick update on that. Yeah, Maria, you're muted. Maria?
Hello?
Hello, yeah, you're back, yes.
Oh, God.
Hello, Maria?
I'm back, sorry. Just thrown out the minute I try and speak. That wasn't very helpful. Can't get my camera on, but can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Right, on the appointments, an advert is going out in Derby Homes News with information about becoming a tenants board member, and we've already put information out through social media and had 2 enquiries with a closing date from the, a closing date on applications, which I think, if Jackie can help me, was it 4th of January?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, 4th of January. So encouraging that we've had 2 enquiries already.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Any further matters arising on that page or on the final page? Okay, right, okay, thank you. If we can then move on, announcements of the chair. I've just got one brief announcement, not for discussion, but please just for note for everybody's information that chair is the agreed form of address for everybody in Derby Homes. So if you can please all just try and remember that, and that's the address that we use. Thank you. Moving on then, item 9. Are there any statements from members of the board? No. Okay, thank you. Jackie, I don't think there are any questions, are
there? No questions, Mike.
Thank you. Item 11 then, committee chairs feedback. Ian, first audit on the 19th of October.
Thank you, Chair. The Audit Committee had a meeting on the 19th of October. This is quite a brief report this time. We considered an internal audit progress report, and the committee noted the report and agreed that the customer first audit be removed from the 2021 internal audit plan and replaced with a financial resilience, financial health audit instead. The committee also considered the annual fraud plan and agreed to make recommendations to the board, and these recommendations are on your agenda tonight at item A14. And there was also a training update report which the committee noted. And that is all I have to report tonight.
Thank you, Ian. Any questions or comments to Ian? Okay, if we can pass on then to governance, Jan, 12th of November.
Hello, everybody. Yes, so only a couple of weeks ago, we had the governance committee, and the majority of us were actually at that meeting as well, where we had really good discussions on a lot of the items there. So we talked about the leaving employment policy review, and that's again on the agenda tonight. We talked about the financial procedure rules, which again is on the agenda tonight. Throughout all of the discussions, we had some really good challenges made, you know, which really helped, I think, the officers sort of to move some of the items a little bit further forward as well. So thank you to everybody who did contribute. We also had a very good discussion on the Derby Homes governance arrangements, and again that is on the agenda tonight with all of the bits in that we discussed. And we talked about the board effectiveness review, and obviously David's just briefed us on the decision that has been made but when it's been published and how that impacts us as well. And then we also looked at the change to standing orders, and that's on the agenda tonight as well. So, and we had an update on the Rule of 85 application as well. That had a case that had been heard as well. So I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. As you said, a lot of the things was very thoroughly discussed and are on the agenda. But if there are any other questions or comments to Jan at this point? No. In that case, we'll move on then to the outstanding actions. And Maria, I think you were just going to update us on those.
Yeah, I'd like to make some proposals on these items, Chair. First one, social value strategy. In order to give this the justice that it deserves, and also to undertake some work with colleagues in the City Council, I'd like to propose that we put this back to June 21, because I think there are some real opportunities to do some modern things around introducing social value through procurement and other things, but I'm just being realistic. We only have so much time to do so much at the moment. So if we could go for June 21 on that. The board effectiveness review, probably I've got a bit of a conflict of interest here, and I'm happy if anybody wants to disagree. But I think now if you want to set me some targets, it might be good that we push that back to April next year, because COVID has rather overtaken us all, I think. And then the final one that was been hanging around for quite a long time, we've looked into the Derby Drink Aware project, and that's actually being delivered by Derby County Community Trust for the city. And as the board will be aware, we do already work very closely with Derby County Community Trust, and rather than become a partner of Derby Drink Aware, what I'm proposing is that we talk to our colleagues over at Derby County and look to promote the work and the information that they put out to our residents, and see what benefit we can get that way.
Sorry, I was muted then. Okay, thank you, Maria. Do we agree to those proposals that Maria's put forward?
Agreed.
Fine by me.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on then to part A of the meeting. Did anybody want to discuss any items from part C? No. In that case, Maria, your report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You'll be relieved to know I'm not going to spend a long time going through this, because it's all there and I'm sure that you've read it. First point in there, the staff survey that we completed in September 20. Very, very reassuring for me that we got such a high response level back, because to actually improve on the level of responses from February, I thought was quite staggering given everything that's going off, and it certainly shows that our staff are engaged and want to tell us what they think. All good all the way through. The big messages for me, the things that are working is the communication that we've got in place with our staff. We've got to keep that up. Being remote from each other is really, really difficult. We are now having more managers' networking sessions, and we will be following that through with more interactive sessions with staff as well. I think one of our real successes has been the increased engagement from our trades teams, who have been traditionally hard to reach. Each and every one of them has now got smartphones, so they can all interact with us through the smartphones, and it's paying dividends in the feedback that we're getting. So unless anybody's got any questions, I don't really propose to say a deal more on that.
Thank you, Maria. I mean, again, just to reiterate, Jen said it in the comment there, really amazing results on the staff survey, and congratulations. And it just reinforces my view what an effective organisation we've got.
Yeah, and I think you'll be pleased to know that we passed that on to all of our managers at the last session that we had with them the week before last, because yeah, I can send updates out, but our managers are doing this day in and day out, so really, really pleased. The social housing white paper, our friends from the Housing Ombudsman Service commented on it earlier, and I've attached an appendix for you, which came through with beautiful timing and saved me an awful lot of work. The NFA cracked it again. If you ever want to question what we get for our membership, there you go. It just lands when you need it. And it's a very, very nicely written summary of the white paper that's now with us. I mean, all I want to say to you as board members tonight is there's nothing in there that we weren't anticipating. So that's good. There is absolutely nothing in there that I disagree with. I just think we should be delivering services that are transparent, responsive, meet people's needs and keep them safe. And you know what? That's top and bottom of it all. Let's not overcomplicate things. That's what we need to aim to be doing. It's going to be interesting, I think, as more information comes through, particularly around the KPIs that are being suggested. And the big thing with them is they're going to be very much perception based. So again, go back to what the Housing Ombudsman was saying to us. It's not always what you do, it's how you do it, because that is what will affect perceptions. And it's also more about the whole locality that somebody lives in, not just their home. And we've got to broaden out and kind of take that whole perspective on board. Because whilst one of the proposed questions says, how satisfied are you with the parts that your landlord can control within your community? Trust me, a resident living in one of our homes will think that Derby Homes has got full control over everything within their community. So if that doesn't spell the need for more partnership working, it never will. We are in a really good position. I keep saying this. David is on panels. I chair the exec steering group at the NFA. We're getting really early warning on anything that comes through. The only thing I would say to board members is, with our experience of consultation papers that we're expecting to start flowing through very soon, they're not going to give us a great amount of time to compose our response. So it is quite likely that we will have to take the draft responses to our chair's briefings and then report retrospectively back to the board.
Right.
I think there might be a couple of questions on this part, Mike.
Yeah, Bob and then Lucy.
It's okay, just forget mine, go straight on to Lucy.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Lucy?
Two things. Firstly, could you circulate your responses to the board before sort of finalising them with the chair and vice chairs, if there's time?
Yep, obviously, if there's time, Lucy, absolutely will do. There is going to be a lot of them, so get ready.
Yeah, I don't guarantee to read them all. It'll depend what else is on my plate. The other thing I was going to ask is, do you think there's any hope? And this, the summary from the NFA talks about the referred to recent works on the review of social housing allocations. And this is really where it's at the top of the last full page from that report. And this is where I really feel that there is an opportunity for greater overall benefit by making the social housing market work more like the private sector ownership market, so that people are moving through chains, and you can use the allocations to enable a chain to move, so that people can move to the location they want, or the bundle, the housing type they need, or whatever, in greater numbers. And I think we could end up with a reduction in overall housing need if we could facilitate that. Whereas at the moment I understand that we can't facilitate it because we've got to give that empty property to somebody who is assessed as needing it.
Right, it's sort of like this could be a short response or a long response. I think
it can be one that's
a tailored response on that would be that is something that we could look at, Lucy, because within the new allocations policy, there's provision there for corporate initiatives.
Okay.
But what I would say is, and I'm sure Claire would echo this, we would like to have the time to be able to look at the advantages and disadvantages. The first thing that we would have to crack would be an IT system that could work that for us. Claire's going to jump in. Please do, Claire.
Yeah, just to say, because I know, Lucy, we've discussed this, haven't we, in terms of the statutory limits on a mutual exchange at the moment, which requires there to be somebody exchanging with somebody else. So we can deal with chains, providing that each part of the chain has a person and a person.
It's got to be a closed chain, hasn't it?
That's right. So it's certainly something that we can continue to explore in terms of whether something like corporate initiative could override that. But the basic premise in the legislation is that it requires two parties for an exchange to occur.
Thank you, Claire.
Yep. Okay, Maria, do you have to carry on?
Yeah, last part of my report, I believe. Just really a very brief bit, just to give you a bit of a clue what I'm up to at the moment. I would say that a good 60% of my time at the moment is spent working with colleagues across the council, looking to manage the impacts that the pandemic's having on the city. Those board members that came to the session on Monday, we talked about the impacts on the city in terms of economic effects on employment and the such like, and we are starting to formulate now the citywide recovery plan. And I guess that this is something that David and I will bring to you in more detail, but we've already started assisting with the relocation of some of our staff to work over with colleagues at the City Council to ensure that essential services can be maintained. And only this afternoon I saw the final bits of paperwork getting in place so that 4 members of staff from Derby Homes can go and join a team that are going to become COVID support officers, actually out and about with residents in the city centre or in our community shopping areas, trying to encourage the right sort of behaviour that we need over the coming months. So there's a lot of that happening. We're also looking at how we build on the fantastic work that we've already started doing with some of our community sector colleagues, the work that's being done through the Community Hub and Community Action Derby, and how we can start to grow that as a real key to helping our communities grow and recover from what's hit us all. Now, as we go forward, as a board, you're going to be receiving some more reports from me that will be around supporting the development of locality working. And as I say, that will be a focus on how we can enable people in communities to either help themselves or use collaboration of agencies to meet needs. It's a massive shift away from the traditional public sector marching over the hill to deal with everything. But I absolutely believe that not only is it the right way to be doing things in the future, but it's going to be the only way that we can effectively do things in the future. And it's all about creating a different front door for people to walk through. Not a front door that you walk through and somebody immediately steps up and says, right, okay, leave it with me and I'll do that for you. But a front door that actually discusses the issues, understands what the issues are, and starts to enable people to find solutions. So really exciting, lots of change and lots of opportunities for you as Derby Homes Board to look to how we can support that development and enablement of our communities as we go forward. And I'm really hoping that Jeanne Shepherd will be able to bring some experience from her working life to help us on that one as well. I knew these board members would be ever so useful, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Any further comments? Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. You wanted to reinforce what Maria is saying there. I think we've had a real, opportunity to test and work differently over the last 8 months. If we hadn't have done that, hadn't worked differently and been quite radical and quite, fast-paced and agile to do that, we wouldn't have done so well, I think, in supporting our community through what has been, and it still is, an extraordinary unprecedented time. And we've really learnt some lessons about that work, and we want to keep going for the future. And a real sense of, let's try and simplify the public service offer in locality. Recognise we live in places, and the more we can join up our resources in places to support those people, to help themselves, but also to provide support if they need it, but doing it in one way rather than we've got, 3 or 4 different officers from the council who work in locality, but separately. You have housing officers working in locality. We've got not saying nothing about the police and the GP surgery and all the other services that might exist around that locality, and they're all a bit disparate. And I think Claire and I had a conversation very early, but last year, tonight I started, Claire, about how a complaint we get often involves a whole range of those bits of services, and it's all really complicated, untangling it all and trying to find what the solution is. If we can actually, as public services, simplify that offer by working collectively in locations, we have a much better chance of supporting people properly. And I think if anything we've learned anything over the last 8 months is building resilience. That has to be our priority. How do we as public servants help build resilience for our people? Because actually that's what they need to live, in fact, fulfilling lives into the future. So really exciting, really transformational, absolutely collaborative with Derby Homes City Council and broader partners. So yeah, more information coming back to that in a month's time.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, Rachel. Any further comments on that?
Yes, please, Mike. Can Maria tell me what powers these COVID officers will have?
I think that they're not. It's not enforcement, Alan.
No, I can really answer that.
Yep, thanks, Rachel.
Because they're in our team. So this is part of the funding that the government have given us. We've had quite a lot of funding for particular things to be done at the moment in this particular period of the emergency. This was funding provided to the police and to the local authority to provide support around enforcement. So the police obviously use their money around their particular types of enforcement, and we have been working with the police to make sure that our resources are complementary. So ours are really very much about that engaging, explaining, supporting, encouraging behaviour. They're not about enforcing, they're not fixed penalty notices type capacity. They are about trying to encourage and support people to do the right thing. So our enforcement part of our role has been particularly around businesses. So if we have businesses that aren't complying and are therefore against regulation, we are taking action and enforcing against them if necessary, if they're persistently not living by the restrictions. But the COVID support officers are very much about being a presence, being supportive, encouraging and supporting change.
Okay. If there are no further comments on this, thank you, Maria, for your report. A3 is the finance update on intermediate rents. Those of us who were here not here, virtually here on Monday afternoon, we've had some discussion on that, but David, can you take us through this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And this came from a couple of places. One was obviously at the last board meeting, you asked me to write a report on this particular issue, and much earlier on, the council were interested in, if you like, market rents and near market rents and what would be the best way forward. So what I've done is to split this report into 3 parts, and the first part is really about whether we can do this or not in terms of the legal and regulatory basis, and the positive news there is that we certainly can, as long as we stick to the rules that we've set out in the report. But in effect, if we don't get any public subsidy, then it's something that we can do as a registered provider of social housing, that we could intervene if there is a financial and a strategic need to do that. So that adds, if you like, another way in which we can help the council and do something different, should that be part of what we collectively want to undertake. It obviously fits in very well with our own objectives in terms of delivering more housing. The downside of it, I suppose, is that intermediate rents, to make it stack up financially, are going to be much higher than affordable rents. And part of the discussion we had on Monday that Mike alluded to is that if we were able to get grant on an affordable rent, then actually that comes out marginally better anyway. The problem with that at the moment is that we've not got a lot of access to grant, although there is a new grant round coming with Homes England. And of course, we are still barred from getting right to buy funding allocated to us in terms of the one-for-one replacement money, which has to be spent through anyone other than Almos in effect. So clearly, if that rule was to change, we could look at that again. But in the meantime, we've got limited ways in which we can invest our cash to deliver new additional housing. But this is one way in which we could do it, where the money does stack up. And it does take a while to recover your investment, but not much longer than most of our other options. So if we are going to go down that route, obviously we'll need the council support, because we'll need loans, we'll need the formal approval, and so on. One piece of good news in the announcements yesterday from the Chancellor was buried away a bit in the smaller print, but the PWLB announcement is that whilst they are going to clamp down on the commercial investments by councils, they are going to therefore reduce the margin that the government takes on PWLB loans, and that means that loans that went to the council and then came on to us would be a whole % cheaper, and that actually will transform the finances again. So I'm going to have to redo all the figures I gave you on Monday, I'm afraid, Mike and others, but they will help enormously on virtually every option, because the money we borrow from the council will be a whole % cheaper. So I'm quite excited by that prospect, but clearly we've got to balance that with our own financial capacity. And again, we went through that on Monday to some extent. There is a limit to the numbers we can do through this route. But we've then got to judge who we're going to allocate it to, back to the discussion about allocations to quite a large extent, and to think who we're going to target, because there would be a limited number that we could do. But overall, I'm certainly quite positive that we certainly can do it legally and regulatory wise. Financially, every purchase, every site will be different, but it is definitely an area we can do if the numbers are right. And we can help, if you like, at the margins for the council, and look forward to talking to various council officers to see if we can bring this sort of idea forward. Obviously subject to comments from the board and whether it's the right thing to be getting involved in this particular market, etc.
Thank you, David. Roy, I think you were somebody who raised this at one point a while ago. Do you want to pass a comment?
Just to say that this is a move forward that I welcome. I think the work that's been done is really good, and I hope that the board will take the opportunity to follow this through further.
Thanks, Roy. Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I wasn't at the meeting on Monday. I was unable to make what I presume was a much more detailed conversation about this issue. But, I mean, from a purely kind of objective perspective, my key objective always is to try and maximise the amount of homes we can build. Like, that is, for me, the biggest thing that we can do in terms of a board to support. The one caveat I would say is build as many as we can, extend it to as many people as we can, but we shouldn't allow it to be at the cost of building affordable homes, affordable rent properties. So, you know, as long as there's no implications in that sense, David, if you could reassure me of that, I would be supportive in that sense. But, you know, primarily build the homes, ideally at an affordable rent. If we can't maximise that, you know, look to alternatives like this, I would support.
Yeah, if I could come back on that, Chair. You touched on the central dilemma, really, Sarah, because it's not that it's a sort of one-for-one trade-off, but there might be, as I feel like, a two-for-one trade-off, and trying to get the right balance between affordable and intermediate rents is a key thing that we need to keep an eye on, absolutely. And it's about who we are targeting with which product. So what I'm trying to highlight is we can do both products within our existing structure, and we can probably get a reasonable balance between the two. And I'm more than happy to sort of go through the figures at a separate meeting if you wish to do that.
Chair, can I just briefly come back on that, if I may? I know the people have indicated it's a bit cheeky, but sorry. Yes, I would be really interested in going through those, David, because as I say, I think any way in which we can build homes has to be welcomed because of the crisis that's facing us in terms of, you know, demand for properties. But coupled with that is the real impact. I mean, we discussed it at length last night at full council in terms of the poverty that's around us, you know, and the homelessness issues, and looking at how we can make living in a good, secure, long-term piece of accommodation managed by Derby Homes affordable for the majority of people, because the implications of the pandemic are going to be long-lived and wide-ranging. And the issues around affordability of rent is going to be huge, I think. So, you know, in principle, I support any way in which we can build new homes, but I would be cautious about these properties at intermediary rent taking over in terms of the numbers we can build of affordable. That's all.
Yeah. Lucy, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it was a really interesting discussion that we had earlier in the week. We explored not just this sort of things that David's put into his report here, but also some of the wider ways in which Derby Homes can facilitate what happens in Derby. One of the things that we've had discussions is wearing a different hat. I'm on planning committee, and we see the same few housing developers coming in to do developments. It seems to have got more and more polarised, if you like, in terms of the people who will build in Derby. And so one thing that we could do to help Derby is to actually get more builders able to be building new homes rather than doing house extensions, because we seem to have got a gap. You can get a house extension, you might get a one property built, but people who want to build 3 or 4 houses seem to have disappeared out of the existence. They've been bought up by some of the big people. And if we can regenerate that market, then we can have more home building of all sorts, and somebody else is putting the capital in to build the homes. It doesn't have to all come from Derby Homes to do the capital. But Derby Homes might be able to do the facilitating to be able to get that small estate moving, so as to be able to put the infrastructure in and then sell off the plots for other people to build, and building a mixed tenure estate. And that's the sort of thing that I think that it would be really exciting to look at. And of course, providing a service plot, there's going to be a bit of profit in it for that. So, you know, it's a win-win situation for what Derby Homes can achieve. And I don't know whether, Chair, you think it would be useful to have some sort of facilitated discussion going forward to be able to explore that with the City Council and the strategic housing people and the planners, and something to come back along those lines for us as a board to be able to help put together. I don't know.
Rachel, have you a comment on that?
I think, you know, I think Sarah Russell's made the point that the pandemic has changed or exacerbated a lot of the structural problems in our housing market as a whole, and it requires us, I think, to use every tool we've got in our armoury, if you like, to make sure that we can provide access to affordable homes to those people who are going to need them now, and they're going to need them in the future. So I think absolutely the delivery of affordable social rented accommodation is priority, but if we can do other things that can maximise, you know, more provision, then we should do that. The issue is the developers is a national issue. The big developers, the house builders, have bought up all of those smaller organisations that used to do that, and, you know, with the greatest respect, they've made a lot of money out of doing that, and often land banking land and not delivering it particularly quickly and maintaining high prices and all of those things. But anyway, we can try and get into that market to try and have more of an influence to create a different dynamic. It's got to be worth a try. But yes, we're working very closely on how we might want to do that. But all those ideas are, you know, in the pot.
Thank you, Rachel. I've got Jeanne and then Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My sort of comment really is kind of around us sort of developing sort of a wider range of what we do to enable us to still be able to do and expand what our core business is as well, so that actually by doing the sort of intermediate building for intermediate rent, we'll be bringing more income into the business as well, and then that can then also be used to help to grow the our core sort of thing about helping sort of, you know, our social housing tenants as well. So I kind of think that having that wider remit will actually help what's sort of growth that the scenario Sarah was talking about as well.
Oh, thank you, Jen. Jen?
Hi, Mike. I've just put a link into. Maybe you can hear me. I just put a link into the chat box because I think it's really important for Derby Homes as an organisation to consider alternative business models. And there's actually a housing association in Belper which has invested in a co-housing estate, which is where a bunch of private individuals get together and collectively buy a piece of land, but in that instance there is opportunities for social and affordable housing, and I'd just like to bring that to the kind of board and executive team's attention as something that might be worth investing, because there was certainly a few years ago one cooperative who wanted to create a co-housing community in Derby, and the reason that they, I think, didn't progress in the city was because they were struggling to find the right site.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for the link. Ian?
I just wanted to say, Chair, I support what Jeanne said. I think by having alternative models, you can bring in more money that can support the core business. It's not a competition between one or the other. It's working in tandem to maximise resources and recycle that back into the core business. I don't think it should be seen as a rival to what we do as the main business.
Yep. Thank you, Ian. I think the very supportive comments looking at quite interesting proposals. I think what the recommendation here is not to actually commit us to anything other than to continue making these discussions and possibly, as Lucy and Rachel have said, taking them even wider, but to approve a pilot programme, as it says in 1.4, with discussion in the council on the details. Are we happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. If we can then move on then to item A4. In Sean's absence, Maria, you're going to take us to the property update.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a good go, Chair. Again, very briefly, because Sean's report is of a standard format. On the new build update, I can absolutely confirm that we're now in the process of phased handovers down at the War Memorial Village, and I visited that site about 10 days ago and was really, really impressed. They are fabulous bungalows with the highest energy efficiency standards in there, and I'd love to have my name down for one, but I don't think I'm going to qualify, but they are absolutely lovely. I also went up to Perth Street at Chaddiston, which is the ex-council social care building that was demolished, and again we're on phased handovers there as well, with some really, really complex adapted homes that have gone in for specific families, which is it's just going to make such a huge difference to people's lives. So that is all great to see. Bracknell Drive, the bungalow there that we've built, that's due for handover pre-Christmas. So we're going to have another really happy family, and all good, all good. Chesapeake Road, Chesapeake Community Centre is now demolished, and the team are now pressing ahead on the plans for the redevelopment of that site. And then I'm going to go straight through, unless you've got any questions in between, just a very quick update on the energy efficiency bit at the end of the report. Sean assures me that everything is on track for the council to put in the bid under the Green Homes Grant by the deadline of the 4th of December. It's a bid that Sean has been working on closely with colleagues from the council, and it'll comprise work on both stock that we manage and private stock as well. So that's really exciting. I'm sure somebody will say, Maria, that's a very short deadline for when work has to be completed. And my answer to that is one that I've stolen from Claire Mabarney. And the answer is we would not apply for the grant if we weren't confident that we could deliver. So yes, it is a challenging one, but we're going for that. And then at the top of page 3 on this report, just to confirm that we're also finalising the details of a scheme that will improve some of our non-traditional flats. I think I'm right in saying it's at Mackworth, and we are looking to go on a joint bid with Nottingham City Homes under the Energy Sprong project that you've all heard of before. Although Sean was initially, I think it's fair to say, he wasn't totally over the moon with that project, he does now acknowledge that it is probably one of the best on the market. So a lot of exciting work going on around energy efficiency, and I think a lot more to come as well. And Sean did say, Lucy, he's happy to talk it through with you next week if you've got more questions on it.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you, Maria, for stepping in at the last minute. Any questions, comments to Maria? Okay.
Can I just say, Chair, that on the bit about will we complete in time on the energy efficiency, I think the government is going to find it very hard to get enough people to subscribe to this to get it completed. I think they will welcome with open arms people coming forward and saying they can complete. So absolutely. I think we should push ahead full speed to try and get as much as we can to do this.
Absolutely agree, and the fact that this is the second round because exactly what you predicted happened the first time. Not enough people came in, so you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I also think this is where you have to be brave, because it's exactly what we did with all of the funding bids around rough sleepers. We were very bold and we made some brave initial bids, and because we delivered, we keep getting more funding. So hopefully that will be the same on the energy efficiency. I'm happy to take any questions, but I do formally just want to draw your attention to the regulatory compliance report that Sean has attached. I know there was a bit of a blip with the copying of this, but I can confirm compliance in all areas, and it just makes sense that that is formally minuted.
Right. Yep. Thank you, Maria.
Okay.
Okay. If we can move on then to
Chair.
A5. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Lucy, I missed that. Yes.
Thank you. Just a point to be aware of. I hadn't realised until I had an exchange with one of the planning officers that if you change the outside look of your property, you should actually be applying for planning approval to make that change. So if you've got a brick-built, solid-walled house and you want to externally clad it, unless it's going to look as if it's still brick-built at the end of it, it's a change that should go through planning.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether all the work that we've been doing on some of our solid-walled properties have gone through planning like that, because I know quite often it doesn't happen. But just something to be aware of, because if there's a planning delay on this as well, then it's something just to be aware of.
Yeah. Very important point. Thank you, Lucy. I'm sure if Sean's not aware of it, Maria will make sure he is.
Yeah, it's not note to self, it's note to Sean.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Then now move on to A5, housing services, and Claire is actually on leave, so thank you very much, Claire, for joining us when you should be on leave.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got three brief updates and one area that I would like to ask the board to consider. I'll go through the updates first. I spoke to the board at our last meeting regarding the new allocations policy and the planned implementation date for early October. And my report just confirms that the go-live date did occur. And in terms of kind of early indicators around the changes, and particularly the change to create a third tier of corporate initiative, I just wanted to draw out that in the first month of the new policy, 10 of the allocations went to the new corporate initiative band, 7 of those are allowing move through of accommodation to help support the housing pathways for homeless people, and 3 to care leavers, which are clearly another very important strategic priority for the city. So it does look on the early indications that the third tier of the corporate initiative band is working well. My second update was around the Next Steps accommodation programme, the NSAP programme, and I think most people are aware of this, but just to formally advise the board of the outcome of our bid was a full allocation of £1.7 million in terms of that Next Steps programme. We are on track in terms of the acquisition of 20 properties that have to be acquired and moved into by the end of March 21, and we anticipate and are on track to have our first set of 10 purchased by Christmas. So really good work and collaboration between the council's teams and ourselves to get the momentum needed for that. I'm going to skip the other one, if I may, and just give an update on the Register Providers workshop that took place on the 10th of November. And again, this was a city and county initiative to try and bring our register providers partners to the table around the Keeping Everyone In initiative and creating that flow through the system of social housing to enable us to be able to respond to rough sleeper numbers. The workshop was really well attended. I think we had 36 people on the call. It lasted 2 or 3 hours, 3 hours I think it was, and at the end of it we had pledges from 8 registered providers across the city and county, which is fantastic news. We're following those up with those registered providers. The very next day we were offered a direct match to an individual property from a registered provider, which we took up. One thing that was unanimous from the group is that they very much wanted to continue having such a forum. So we have agreed it across the city and county that we will host a registered providers forum once every 6 months. and it was clear that certainly in terms of trying to find the people that needed to be at the meeting, that we weren't as connected across the city and county with registered providers as we needed to be. So I think that we've worked to close that hole and also help respond to the keeping everyone in agenda. My last update was really around an area that Lucy asked us to investigate around home shares some while ago, and it kind of got put back a bit with the pandemic. But we have been exploring ways in which we can support older people, particularly around isolation, loneliness, and also to the points that Maria and Rachel have talked about in terms of how we can better support communities to support themselves. And we've been looking at two options so far, which I've outlined in the report. One essentially is around having some sort of matching system where people can move in perhaps with an older person who's looking for some company, perhaps a bit of help in terms of perhaps shopping, in exchange for being able to live rent-free. So dealing with the issues of housing demand, but also having a positive impact on isolation and loneliness. This is something that we know is working elsewhere, and I've given an example there in the report. And a second area that we're exploring is one where people remember the old warden service that we used to have in our cities and counties, and it used to be well loved, but became unaffordable. And so there are examples where people have sought to offer reduced rents to people in exchange for them providing some of the elements of what the old warden service would have looked like. So perhaps arranging some community activities, perhaps doing a bit of shopping, looking out for somebody who might be unwell. And so these are the two areas that we're exploring. But before we got any further into this, I mean, we've got a couple of presentations coming to us as officers in December, but I just wanted to seek broader kind of views and thoughts from the board as to whether this is a direction that we should be travelling in.
Mike, you're on mute.
Thank you, Maria. I was just saying, before we take any comments, we have just gone past 8 o'clock, so I need to ask for a suspension of standing orders to enable us to finish the meeting. Is that approved? Yep, okay. Right, thank you, Claire. Any questions and comments to Claire? I see Jen's been very helpful again and given us another link to look at. Sarah, you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks for your report, Claire. Oh, look, you're getting snacks or something. Can we have some? Sorry, super junior. I think
dinner time. It's 3 o'clock.
I know, right? Get that tea down, you love. So this older person's home share thing. Primarily, my reaction is one of interest because I think it could prove beneficial for both participants in any home share, particularly if we're going to target kind of younger people who might struggle to afford a rent of their own, and perhaps older people who live on their own who are at risk of loneliness, isolation, and all that sort of thing. In principle, it sounds quite compelling, but I mean, I did look at this a few years ago when the pilot was going on. I think it finished in like 2018 or something, didn't it? The pilot programs that were ran. And there were some people who participated in some of the pilots who reported problems with it in various forms. I think if we were going to go down that route of the home share issue, we would have to very, very carefully match and select participants and have some sort of process in place to ensure there were any ways to resolve disputes or concerns about, requests from the older person to perhaps do more around the house than the younger person was perhaps prepared to be doing, and things like that. And similarly, you know, safeguarding issues for the older person. And I know these are all things that I'm sure you will have thought of, Claire, and you will be, you know, looking into. But it's just from my perspective on that particular issue, I think we'd have to be very careful and understand what implications that might have for us as an organisation as well.
And I think that, sorry, just to say, Sarah, that I think that we've got a list of questions, as you have, as long as our arm, really, in terms of the people that are doing it, because I think the pressing concern is around safeguarding. And I'm really interested in those that are delivering these kind of matching services, as to how they're managing that, and also how they're monitored in terms of how they're managing that as well. So I agree that there are concerns, but at the same time, I think that it's something that we ought to explore in the times that we're in.
I agree with that, Claire. I don't think there's any harm in us, you know, investigating the idea. I think it's worthwhile, to be honest, and the principle, as I say, is sound. It's just about how it's delivered, monitored, and, you know, that's it really, I think.
Yeah. Lucy.
It's absolutely key, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to have a corporate organisation looking after those safeguarding things and the implications of it and so on, because these sorts of arrangements happen informally every now and then, because somebody is vulnerable and needs help, and their community may find somebody who may or may not actually be suitable. But people were moved in because it seems to be a better option, particularly at the moment, than going into a care home with the implications that can have. But I think to have a more formal process with those safeguards, with the checks, with somebody to go to mediate if there are problems, I think that is really exciting. And I certainly hope that you'll be taking it forward. It's interesting that Jen put up the thing about links with students, because I'd written on my papers that are there opportunities within the university as well. I'm thinking particularly students who are doing some of the caring courses at the university, who very often seem to be going into those as mature students rather than straight from university, for whom it can actually be quite challenging to be able to finance yourself through. And this may be something that would work. And the other group I was thinking of, actually some care leavers. And there may be, depending on who the older person is, if you've got an older person who is compos mentis but needs some support physically, to have a care leaver there may actually be quite a good match. So, you know, it's horses for courses, and I think the assessment process is key. So all power to your elbow, go on investigating, see where it takes us to. Right.
Jed, if you're back with us again now.
Hi, yes I am, thank you Mike. I just wanted to feedback, I'm sorry if it was already discussed when I was absent, but this is actually a fairly standard model of care which is used in social work and social support, called adult placement. I can pop some information onto the chat here which I've just found. Essentially it's like fostering, but for adults with vulnerable older people, or people with learning disabilities, or people with mental health problems. But obviously there is an established model, and there's a lot of information there, Claire, which might be of some use to you.
Thank you very much, Jen. Any further questions or comments to Claire?
Just one from me, Chair. Far be it from me to not get excited. I normally get very excited, but to be honest, when Claire and I discussed this a few months ago, it filled me with dread. I'm being honest. One of the things that I'm very, very keen to explore is if any of the other organisations that are currently running this model are being directly run by councils or council-owned companies, because the risks are so huge. And I think there would be a lot to look at around safeguarding, the extent of what checks we might or might not be able to do. I think we'd need to fully understand. And I think, yeah, we can look at that, Jen. I know that they do adult placements, but I kind of feel that there's quite a lot of social care involvement still with those. I think when I think back and we took a decision not to embark on shared tenancies because of the risks, and we took the decision then to allow the YMCA to do the shared accommodation for young people, I think it might not be a bad thing for us to understand it and then look at who might be best placed to take it forward, which may not necessarily be Derby Homes or the council.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I think looking at the comments that are coming through, the predominant one is that the issues just raised about safeguarding are absolutely paramount, but if there is a way of doing this, and possibly the model you suggested by looking at other people, then there's nothing to stop us having further discussions, but please be very aware of it.
We wouldn't do anything without coming back to the board with a very, very comprehensive report which would express our concerns and give reassurances on where we thought we could mitigate those concerns.
Yep. Thank you, Maria. And thank you again, Claire, for giving your report when you're on leave.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy your tea.
Thank you.
Right. Moving on then, A6 Health and Safety Update. Again, Maria, you deputised for Sean at the forum this afternoon.
I've had a busy day, Chair. First of all, I think I'd like to just hand over to Ian to give some brief feedback on this afternoon's Health and Safety Forum, if that's all right, Ian.
Ian?
Sorry, I was muted there, Chair, sorry. Well, this afternoon's meeting was quite a good meeting. We had, as it says in the report in front of you, item 411 there. There is one long absence simply because of a vehicle accident. One of our workmen had a vehicle running behind him, and it's affected him, and he'll be off for some time. The violence and aggression reports, some of these were they're always concerning, to be frank. A lot of them are caught at Milestone House, but there are a lot of abusive things go on to our concerning our staff, and it is something we need to keep an eye on. So there's always something interesting comes up at these meetings, and we just need to keep an eye on things, because some of the issues that some of our staff have to deal with are really, they shouldn't have to deal with them at all.
And yeah, we had a good discussion on that, didn't we, this afternoon, Ian? And for me, it was great because I don't get to attend Health and Safety Forum very often. So it was a really enjoyable opportunity this afternoon. Just one other thing, Ian, that I kind of picked up this afternoon that was really refreshing, actually. Julie Walker gave us some feedback from Milestone House. And I think we all appreciate that our colleagues at Milestone House really are on the front line, dealing with some of our most vulnerable customers. And they have very recently sat down as a team with their managers and looked to how they reshape the actual shift delivery patterns, because we're very conscious that we need to keep our staff in bubbles so that if we do get an outbreak at Milestone House, we're limiting the number of people who could potentially be exposed. And I just thought it was fabulous that Julie was able to feed back on the positive stuff that they've managed to put in place now. Instead of having face-to-face handovers between shifts, they're doing it on Zoom from different offices so that staff are staying separate and the such like. So I thought that was really, really great that the staff are being empowered and allowed to contribute to solutions. So that was good. I mean, within the health and safety report itself, just happy to take any questions.
Right. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Maria. Any questions?
Questions? Just, I guess, really to confirm, no great changes required to the way that we operate as a result of exiting lockdown next week into Tier 3. Our current measures are all adequate.
Right. Thank you for that reassurance. Okay, if we can move on from there, still on health and safety. In fact, the next 3 papers are all reviews of policies.
I love this next one, Chair. This is a policy review that requires no review, so if the board would be happy to approve that, we can move on.
Well, I think the board approved it the last time, and since there's no changes, why should the board be changing it at all?
Thank you, Ed. Okay, we will then move on.
Chair.
Oh,
Chair.
Sorry.
I don't think I was here last time, but my comments are as a result of reading the Housing Ombudsman's paper at the beginning of the meeting, because having just read that and then coming on to this, I felt that what was missing here was a clear link to reviewing and considering the learning from incidents. I read through it and then thought, no, it's not in there, and then I looked at it again and I still didn't spot it.
Okay, Chair,
and I just wondered whether it ought to be there.
Right.
And looking at the responsibilities things, it's there's a bullet point under managers and supervisors that says making sure all work-related accidents, incidents and ill health are reported, investigated and any necessary remedial action taken. But it's quite negative, rather than being a positive thing to say that we will change stuff. And over the page, when we're talking about employees, the 3rd bullet point says immediately bringing to the attention of their manager any equipment, situation or working practice that might cause serious and imminent danger. And again, those are the 2 that go together, but I thought they could be more positive in terms of taking the learning forward. That was my only point. If people want to approve it as it is now, that's fine. But I just that was my learning from the report at the beginning of the meeting.
Maria, can we add something about taking?
I think we could put something in about learning. I agree on that. Yeah. But I'm not sure whether just changing the other kind of language is going to add anything or take anything away from the document.
Can I just say, Chair, there shouldn't be any impression at the board that there isn't learning. I mean, one of the things that happens at these health and safety forum meetings is that we're constantly looking at things that have happened and how Danby Homes deals with them in order to learn from them and to protect both Danby Homes and our staff from future events that might we might need to look out to guard against. So every time we have a health and safety forum, there is a learning experience going on. Now, I don't know whether Lucy's suggesting that perhaps the words aren't just sort of dripping off it doesn't quite say that perhaps in the. I'll need to read it again myself, to be honest. When Stuart said to me he'd looked at this and he was confident no changes at all were required. That's in the knowledge of how it's actually working, not just what the words say. So I think Lucy, I don't know whether Lucy has a point in saying maybe some of these words could be softer rather than harder. I think that's maybe Stuart's a sort of quite a practical person, and I don't think we should sort of regard it necessarily as a bad thing that sort of that is put in a very precise way. But what I would like for the board to understand is that Danby Homes is a learning organisation in terms of health and safety, and every single incident that comes up is reported in a way that shows how we learn from that and how we focus. I actually asked a question today because I was concerned that the actual report we had first on the agenda tonight about the Ombudsman's report, I had a concern about sort of that in a health and safety context, which when I raised it and we talked through how things work in practice, I didn't need to raise any question at the board, because the way it was explained to me was the way we do things actually covers us for the incident the issue I was concerned about. So I would be confident things are working well, and I'm not, well, it's up to the board whether they want to change the words, but I think it would be tweaking rather than making a meaningful change in what they mean.
Thank you, Ian. Sorry, Lucy, can I just come in on your point? I do think, actually, if you look, well, first of all, the bottom of page 85 and then moving on to 86, the section is supporting continuous improvement. Derby Homes believes that continuous improvement is important. To achieve this, we will. And the final bullet point is use the information positively to improve performance. Now, that to me suggests learning from the things.
Chair, I agree that, you know, what Ian has described is what is happening. The ethos is there. I just don't think that the policy celebrates that. And I think it's the black and white of a policy is what is there to be seen, you know, on the website or whatever. And I think that we can be more positive about what is going on than the policy actually is saying. So I don't think it's not a criticism of what we're doing, it's that we're not celebrating what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, Chair, I think what you've got here is a health and safety policy statement of intent that's written very much under the requirements of the Health and Safety at Work Act. And that's why it is as it is. I would disagree, Lucy, and I think we shout from the rooftops in relation to our approach towards corporate health and safety. And I think 14 or 15 ROSPA Gold Awards kind of endorses that.
Maria, that's fine. Let's not talk about it anymore.
Excellent.
Okay, Thank you. If we can then move on to the next policy, freedom of information policy, David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And as you said, there's quite a number of these reports, and also, as Jan said, there's quite a number of these reports that have already been elsewhere. But this one is another triennial review of freedom of information policy. And again, similar to the last one, there isn't really much real change to it, just updating the legislation. So hopefully I'll recommend that one to you and see if there's any comments.
Yeah, and the track changes, thank you, David, are very easy to see. Any comments on that one, or can we approve it?
Can I just make the comment, Chair, that when we do the minutes, we need to be careful. We've got two item A9s on the agenda. The freedom of information policy is item A9, and so is the procurement policy.
You're quite correct. Yes, I'd missed that.
It should be A8.
It should be A8 on the. Yes, thank you very much for that. Yes. You obviously read these things very carefully. Thank you. If we could approve that, then go on to the third one, then.
Chair, may I just two very small things? 412. It talks about EIR Derby. I think it says it should be Derby Homes in that sentence.
412.
412. It's not clear what information is being requested in the FOI or EIR. Derby Homes has a duty to clarify. And just a point of when you're looking at something printed out rather than clicking through on it, FOI in this what do you call it? This script.
Yeah.
The I looks just like an L. It's like a small L. And I think it'll make no difference if it was FO small I, but it would actually mean that somebody knew what it was saying. So just to be aware of that in terms of if somebody is reading it.
It is specified
in a website.
It does say FOI.
Yeah, in the foi.derbyhomes@derbyhomes.org is the email address, but it looks like FOL on form 13. It may come up somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it's just to be aware of.
Just on the email address, yes, because the email address can be all lowercase anyway, yes.
That's
okay,
right.
Thank you, yes. Okay, with that slight amendment, can we approve it?
Yeah.
Thank you. The third one then is procurement policy. David again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, a three-yearly review, again, not fundamental changes, but we have re-emphasised the point that's been made a few times about authorised employees leading any procurement should look first to see if there's an existing Derby Homes procurement, a City Council procurement, or a consortium arrangement that they can tap into. And only if they felt that that was offering very poor value for money, move on to any other options.
Right. Any comments, Ian? You've often commented on procurement policy. You're muted still, Ian.
I'm pleased to say, Chair, that tonight I'm not raising any adverse issues on either the procurement policy or on the item later on the agenda where there's a whole list of waivers, which I think must be a first for me that I've not found anything to complain about. Yes.
Thank you very much for that positive comment, Ian. With Ian's ringing endorsement of this policy, can we approve it?
Chair?
Oh, yes, carry on. Yes, Lucy. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up here something it's talking about Derby Homes procurement objectives R2. Now, one of the things that's going through slowly through the council is trying to get the council's procurement to sort of line up with things like the climate change emergency and needing action on climate change. Now, I haven't got the whole set of amendments to this to be able to do that for this document, but we've got a set of bullet points on that second page, on the first substantive page in the introduction, of things it's trying to achieve. And within there, it would be really nice if there were, as a statement about environmental awareness and reducing the organisation's carbon footprint, and potentially also supporting the local economy, which is sort of touched on later on. I don't know how that would then be reflected in the actual policy. So I'm raising it as a concern without saying I don't know what to do about it. But I think it's something that maybe needs to have somebody think about.
David?
Yeah, I mean, it's a perennial difficulty, isn't it, balancing value for money with all our other principles. And we do specifically talk about sustainable procurement towards the end of the policy, and particular focus on the environment. Whether that's enough or not is a different question. But we had the same issue with social value, with whistleblowing and a whole discrimination as well. And localisation of benefits, and trying to get all of those things balanced together with value for money that's the perennial issue with any individual procurement, particularly where they're large ones.
Yeah.
So yeah, we recognise that issue. I'm not sure I've got any better answers than you have, Lucy, but we do look at all these issues where we can make a difference. It depends on the particular issue that we're looking at.
I think at this stage to acknowledge that environmental element, and particularly the climate emergency element in those sort of procurement objectives, would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
How we go beyond that and what we do beyond that, maybe we need to take advice from elsewhere, but that would be a step, and we could do. It's obviously going to be reviewed again, and
sure,
it can go further later.
Yeah. But I'm sure we could add a statement which actually puts our bullet point directing us to the paragraphs on sustainable procurement, which do talk about environmental.
Can I just make a comment, Chair?
Yes.
I think what we've got to be aware of is we need to be clear what instructions we're giving to staff. You're either going to get the best value for money, or you're going to look for strong environmental considerations, which normally cost more. Not always, but normally do. So there is a dilemma in this, which we're either going to be sitting in the fence and use wishy-washy words, or the board is going to have to take a decision and say we either want strong value for money or we want to be biased in terms of environmental considerations. Otherwise, staff will have an ongoing dilemma. What's the best choice here? Do I go more environmental, or do I sort of stick with getting the best value for Derby Homes? And the board should be giving staff guidance, not leaving staff with dilemmas.
Could I chip into this conversation as well? Given that as a country we have agreed to be carbon neutral in 30 years, and that there's it's thought to be that there's going to be a significant cost associated with making that change, and as an organisation which is developing and managing a very long-term asset, which is housing, I think actually that you know, for me, I appreciate all the things that David has spoken about, but for me actually the climate is the single most important thing of all of those things at the moment. And I think as a housing provider we have to acknowledge that we are going to have to shift this emphasis into our procurement, into all of our policies at some point, and that it's not going to be possible to perhaps accommodate it and value for money as well. But this is something which we probably need to be thinking about, even if it is coming up in 5 or 10 years time, because as Lucy and Ian have both said, it's going to be an incredibly important agenda, and it is incredibly important for people who, you know, young people. My son has got who's 8, has got a degree of environmental awareness that is just second to none, really.
Can I just comment? I mean, I understand fully what Jen's saying, but what we've also got to remember here is that it could affect the number of houses we build. We could, if we're biased environmentally, it may mean fewer houses are built in terms of value, and if we go away from value for money. So it is something as a board we need to consider, because we may, if we're going to go more on the environmental side, we may end up with fewer houses at the end of the day. So people who are on waiting for a house are not going to be happy. And there is a balance to be struck. But we sort of, I think part of the problem is, as this develops, a lot of organisations are sitting on the fence, because there are some very difficult decisions to be made, and we will have to at some point make a decision that perhaps we're going to have fewer houses, or do less but be more environmentally friendly, or not be as environmentally friendly and provide more houses. There is a dilemma. And what Jen says about the government's policy, the government is moving in a direction where we are becoming more environmental. So organisations throughout the country will have to make decisions on this. We need to consider whether our core function of providing houses and maintaining houses, is that still a core function, or are we going to soften that in favour of more environmental concerns? The board needs to take a decision at some point. I'm not suggesting now, but that is a dilemma we'll need to grasp at some point.
Right, can I just come in?
Yes, good.
I think really we need to just draw this one to a close. I just want to remind everybody that Sean is already working with the council on the climate emergency work, on the decarbonisation agenda, and board agreed, a good time back now, that we would take our approach to our policy in line with the council's. Now, I do agree with Lucy that this is something that we should be starting to consider in all major procurements. Certainly, when we look at our supply chain contract, it should be something that we pop in there. But as with everything is about priorities, and it will absolutely have to be a balance. But I do see the emphasis on this is going to increase. It's there within the white paper as well. So I think that we certainly should include it. But taking on board Ian's points, this is something that we have got to support our staff on and work with our suppliers so that we don't make supplies and services unaffordable. It's challenging not just for us but for everybody, but it's something we've got to face up to. So I would propose that we do include something, and we show our commitment, which we already are doing in a lot of areas of work. If we look at our new build, the energy efficiency that we're building into our new homes is superb. New heating installations that are going in. So it's not something new, but it's extending it across everything.
Can I make a suggestion, Chair? So if we can approve this as it is, but making it very clear that we've got another couple of key points where we need to update this policy further. The first one is when the council does, as somebody has said, come up with their own climate change emergency target and the actions it's taking, because clearly we want to be in line with what the council's going to do. But then also there is a wider point coming along the line when the government produces its new Decent Homes Enhancement Standard, which will again increase that dilemma that basically Ian's talked about, with the HRA and with the council. So we will have to align our policies in line with that. So I think that's the way I prefer to do it, if that's possible. But rather than waiting 3 years, it won't be 3 years. It'll be when that next.
Yeah, I think that those are very sound points, David. But I think what Maria was saying is it wouldn't hurt in this instance to on that page in the introduction where we've got 5 bullet points, just to add something which points to the paragraphs at the end on sustainable procurement.
Yeah, I'd agree, Chair.
Absolutely.
And I think that would show it clearly. It is one of the objectives, though, as everybody said, that there is a balance and there will be much further development, so we will have to look at that. With that amendment, can we have some approval?
Chair, I've suggested, I didn't explain it very well here, but can I suggest that rather than the recommendation being to approve the introduction of the revised procurement policy, can we add to that with an expectation to review it once Derby City Council has agreed a target date for Derby to become zero carbon?
Fine. Yeah, I think that's what David was suggesting.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, I think we can all agree with that. Yes.
Thank you.
Then. Thank you, everybody. Now moving on to the next section of papers, which of all, as Jan said a couple of hours ago probably, these were all discussed at a well-attended governance committee. But David, do you want to take us through these?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On A10, that's the one in terms of changing the standing orders, which we had some productive discussions at the governance committee and the board. Hopefully I've captured now the wording that was suggested, and clearly I'd like it to be approved if it's possible. That should solve that particular issue.
Any comments? Or can we approve that? Okay, yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Okay. Right. A11.
Yeah, on leaving employment, Chair, again, this was discussed at the governance committee. I think the one point that was left hanging a bit was the point that Lucy raised about appeals. So what I've drafted, if it's appropriate, is that those appeals would be heard the cases would be heard initially in all cases by the executive, with then all appeals going to the governance committee, and therefore removing the dilemma that Lucy pointed out at the last meeting at the governance committee.
Okay, are you happy with that, Lucy?
Yes, I'm fine with that, Chair. I don't know if Alan is active on the call. I was just because he raised a motion to at full council last night, and as a result of that, the dates, the benefits for people who are made redundant are going to be considered by the council's personnel committee.
Okay.
So that again, may come up in the future.
Yeah. And again, I think what David said, the previous thing, if obviously we want to be in line with the council, if the council are continuing with that, considering that, then we will again consider it.
Come back in due course.
Come back in due course. Yeah.
I'd be grateful if somebody could report that through to me when it happens. That'd be fair.
Yeah. Okay. And because I think there was general agreement with the point that Alan made about that, but it was being in line. Okay. So we're happy with that one, and then moving on to A12, the finance procedure rules.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. The Finance Procedure Rules, again, the Governance Committee did discuss all of this at great depth, and hopefully I've captured the points that were made in the revisions. So the vast majority of this is unchanged, but I did update it in terms of the change that we suggested to needing consultation with the Chair for items above 100,000.
Okay. Right, are we happy with that? Okay, thank you very much for that, David. And then the final one of these, A3, review of governance arrangements.
Yeah, and again, Chair, I've tried to reflect the very small changes that were suggested at the Governance Committee. Again, the point that Alan made about that urgent decisions are exceptional. I think the point that Maria made earlier and that I made at the Governance Committee is that most of those tend to be related to consultations, which seem to get ever shorter and shorter in terms of timescales. And it's now becoming almost not exceptional to respond to a consultation urgently because the timescales just don't work, which is a bit unfortunate. But clearly where they will work, then we will normally take them to the board. In any event, they'll come afterwards.
Yeah, and as again was said a while ago in a slightly different context, if there's opportunity, then the responses to the consultation can be circulated to the board, even if it's not a board meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, right. If we can approve those, then thank you. Moving on then to A14, the annual fraud plan. This was again discussed at the Audit Committee. David?
Yeah, and again, I think we picked up a couple of minor points that hopefully Ian can acknowledge is in line with what was discussed and approved at the Audit Committee for your approval, or suggested for your approval.
Ian, any comment?
I'm happy with the report, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can we approve that then? Thank you. Then we move on to the forward plan, which is there for noting. And then A16, there are no disclosures under the Insurance Act, no fresh disclosures. So if we can now move to Part B, which is confidential, there are only two. Paul, I assume you can turn off the broadcast.